I had access and information that not everybody in my community had that I needed to share. Because it's not enough to be alone at the top, right? Like you have to bring everybody else with you. Otherwise it's lonely, right? Yeah. So everybody should have an opportunity to learn.
Welcome to Entrepreneurhood, where we break entrepreneurship down into 3 simple pillars: business, lifestyle, and motivation. Our goal is to use our personal experiences as industry leaders to guide and inspire young entrepreneurs to see the lesson in every challenge. Because we understand that companies don't succeed, people do. Now, welcome the leaders of Entrepreneurhood, Lay Kim and KB.
Welcome to the neighborhood. You got your boy Lay Kim in the building, and I got my brother KB in the building with me. And we actually have a special guest that we're bringing to the neighborhood for our first guest of 2023, right? And KB is going to share with you guys who our guest is that we are bringing to the community. And then we're going to be sharing our W's and our L's to see, what wins or lessons we had from last week. And we educated Portia about this as well. And she's also going to share either a W or an L. So KB, can you let the community know who our first guest of 2023 is?
We have Portia Wood in the building. Thank you for being here. Welcome to Entrepreneur.
Well, thank you for having me.
Honestly, I don't even know where to start because she does everything. But she's been top 40, under 40 for National Black Lawyers Association, which I'm definitely interested in talking about. She's has a fun fact of women's single champion 3 times in Baltimore City. She still holds the title.
Wow.
She also has a son. She's a professor as well. And she has a Black Trust Fund Kids Association. So she does pretty much everything under the belt. So this episode is going to be good. I have a lot of questions, and literally her bio can be for the first 20 minutes. We don't got that much time, but thank you for having us. Well, thank you for, joining our podcast and us having you, I should say.
Yeah, no, thank you so much for having me, for bringing me on. This is one of my favorite things to do, is to share information, particularly with our community, for generations, right? This kind of information has been gatekept. And with podcasts like this, we get to share what we learn, right? Because what we know is that a rising tide raises all boats. So platforms like this are so important for us to keep sharing the knowledge and our experiences so that our community around us can continue to be uplifted. So I'm just honored to be here and be a part of your platform today. So thank you so much.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So I'm very excited. So one of the new segments that KB and we started is a segment called W's and L's, right? And every week we share either a win or a lesson, because we don't take losses, right? We only take lessons. So KB, he's been on a winning streak, but I know he's due for an L, but we'll see how KB finished last week. So KB, do you have a W or an L to share with the community this week?
It'd be your own brother. Man, I got an L. I got a couple L. I mean, no, sorry. I got a couple W's.
You said it right the first time.
One of my W's is actually, I work with a client and they're looking to get $1 million in funding.
Wow.
And which is dope because this will be my biggest client thus far. And, it was just a regular conversation for me because I've been with them myself, but having that approach, like, all right, I'll get you $1 million in a few weeks. So, of course he had the revenue and basically he needs funding to help in between his contract deals. So they're looking to close out about 28 million this year. So, it's a big deal. It's definitely a big deal. And I'm sitting at the table, my laptop. It was an in-person strategy call. That was the only difference. But it was pretty cool. So from, picking up yoga mats a year and a half ago to being at the table talking about getting somebody $1 million was kind of different.
And what industry is this client coming from?
He has a security company.
Okay.
Yeah. So I didn't realize how profitable what security is, but he has his own security school and he also have contracts with nonprofits as well.
That's amazing.
And he literally just started as a security guard with celebrities. So it just shows you when you scale up, opportunity is there.
Wow. Yeah. That's actually very exciting, bro. I feel like that's a big win.
Yeah.
Helping someone get $1 million in funding, like it's a lot of value.
Yeah, and it was through a family, and then it was through a referral. I haven't seen him since I was like, I say about 7, 8 years old. So he was just kind of shocked, like, yeah, I remember you was this high, and now you helped me get $1 million.
Progress.
Yeah, so it was just dope to have that type of feel, and the trust there is like, you know what, I trust you. You know, this is what you've been doing. I respect your business. I'm not worried about what you charge. And, you know, once that was sealed, you know, I was all smiles.
That's one of the best things to hear. When someone says, I don't care what you charge, I just want the result. I like that.
But it worked out well. And also, like, you know, going back to other episodes talking about a customer journey or handle objections, you know, this is why in the beginning you post what I'm learning now, my strategy is handle the back end on the front end. So when you deal with all the objections up front, we probably spend like 2 minutes talking about the actual commission. The rest of the time, we just building rapport. We're talking about what he's going to do with the funding. And literally, it wasn't even a hard sale. It was just like, all right, that's what you charge. All right, cool. And that was it.
Wow. That's really cool, bro. And I feel like that's the beauty in our community and what we're building is we're trying to, you know, walk people through different things on what they're going to encounter in business. So if people actually listen to what we say in the episodes, it's going to help them grow in business. So I'll go next, and then I'll have Portia, you know, finish off the segment before we jump into the episode. So this week, between my W or my L, I was going to come with an L this week, but then I remember who we had as a guest, and that changed my L into a W. So my W for this week was Kim James. I secured our first podcast guest of 2023 for Entrepreneurhood, and I made sure it was a guest that had the credentials. She has the reputation, and she has the knowledge that the community needed, right? And I wanted to lead the charge with that, and I present to you guys Portia Wood. So that's my W for the
Wild.
You saved them. You saved them.
I saved you. You're welcome. How about this? You're welcome.
I needed that, Portia. So now I'll pass it over to you, Portia. So, you know, for our segment W's and L's, what are you bringing this week? Do you have a W from last week, or do you have an L from last week?
I definitely have a W from last week. So we, through our Black Trust Fund Kids organization and Wood Legal Group, which is our law firm, we actually launched a partnership with Center for Urban Families, which is a nonprofit out of Baltimore City, in conjunction with the Wells Fargo Foundation. And we have launched a legacy wealth planning initiative for their members. So we are doing 8 weeks of financial literacy across spectrums. We've got incredible guests that are coming in and sharing wisdom on investing and retirement and estate planning, all of the things. But we're also doing a legacy wealth plan, estate plans for 10 of the members who have gone through the home buying program with this nonprofit. So they will have complete and comprehensive multi-generational estate planning to protect those homes that they are now in as first-time home buyers. So it's a really incredible initiative. It is one of a kind, right, in what exists in the United States at this point, in this kind of programming in our community. And we're just really excited to see where else it can go with this partnership. So last week we had our third financial literacy class, and it was on debt reduction and credit management. And it was just transformational, right? We shared tools and resources, and people inside of the class, you know, were really sharing their journeys and the fact that this was information that they had never been given before. And so seeing that light bulb go off for people where they're like, hey, okay, now I understand how credit works, or I understand why it's been so hard to get good credit. because we talk about the history. We don't leave anything off the table. I don't think you can talk about generational wealth or money in this country and not talk about the history and the systemic barriers and racism just generally, right, as it exists today and as it has been, because it's starting the conversation in the middle and putting the onus on the individual versus the fact that we are starting hundreds and hundreds of years behind other members of our community. And there is a learning gap there. So we cover all of those things, and then tools and strategies that people can use to help to give their children good credit, right? That generational wealth transformation. Because when we talk about generational wealth, it's not just the money in your pocket, but it's also the knowledge that you can give to give the next generation a leg up. And so, and those foundational elements, right? Helping someone get good credit doesn't necessarily cost you anything.
Yep.
So, yeah, so that was our big win. I was very excited to be able to do that. So, and I look forward to the rest of the program.
Yeah. And I think that's super cool. Like getting a chance to, start off your first time being on Entrepreneurhood with a W. You're setting the bar really high. So we're hoping our guests, our future guests, and, hopefully if we're able to have you back on the episode later down, next couple of months, that we keep the W train going. So that Absolutely. Was very, very impressive. Like, what you think, KB?
Yeah, for sure. I think the what stuck out to me the most is understanding the education behind it, because statistically saying, they say after the third generation is usually the wealth is usually gone because there's no structure in place or the education is not passed down. So, and I think that's what it was before. I think it's even faster now because where the way we adapt information is so much information, so you don't know what you're consuming, if it's good or not, and kids have a hard time listening to their parents. So when it comes down to, they rather listen to, whoever they're influenced by, which is, social media and celebrities, where it's like, this is how we should do it as a family. This is how our family built this. So I think that's very important. And that's why I want to inform structure within my family now. So as I learn more, it's like I'm trying to, feed them as well.
Absolutely. So that's why we do something called the family dinner. So in Black Trust Fund Kids, we have a program called the Family Dinner where people can actually hire me to come out and we will talk multi-generationally, because it's too hard for people to have that conversation in their family when they don't share the same baseline set of knowledge. Right. And sometimes people, especially the older generation, they're like, get out of my pockets. Right. Stop. Why are you asking me about where my will is or where my trust is and where my money's going? I'm not dead. Right. And we have all these conversations, but that really hinders us from creating plans that work collaboratively, from us getting the kids involved and perhaps starting a family business, hiring the kids, creating credit structures, getting life insurance, like all these pieces. We can do it collaboratively. And in one generation, we can transform our entire families, but we have to be willing to work together. And that's where those conversations come in. So I love that you do that, KB. That's something that we really focus on at our firm as well.
That's dope. That's powerful.
Yeah. And what I want to do too, so, I didn't even share what the name of this episode is. So what I want to announce, right, the name of this episode that KB and I decided is how to create or how to obtain generational wealth with Portia Wood. So KB, if you could, lead with what made us decide to speak about generational wealth? Like, why do you think that's important? And why do we want, Portia to share, mainly that topic?
Well, some of the she just said is needed because the conversation is not there. The topic is such a touchy topic in, the Black and brown community to talk about finances. And by the time you talk about it, it's usually too late. It's usually when someone is gone. It's usually when you're in a bad situation. But, we talk, if you make money, don't tell nobody. Like, whatever you have saved, don't tell anybody about it. And I think, we want to change. No, not think. I know we want to change the conversation. We want to change the narrative. So it's best that we have someone that's, well suited in this sector that can give us the information, and also to break it down in a way where we can understand, because verbiage has usually been the language barrier for understanding as well. So most people are like, well, I don't know what she's saying, or I don't know what this person is saying, and I don't get it. And once you get confused as a human, you stray away from it because nobody want to feel less than. So it's important to have in all you're getting, get understanding. So that's the main thing that we like to bring to our channel. So why not bring Portia Wood? Because she's the one person that can, educate and put everybody else on.
Absolutely.
Oh.
And confused mind always says no, so I feel like having an expert share that, that would be an amazing way to start. So let's jump into it. So Portia, if you don't mind, sharing with the community, where you're from, what's your background? How did you get started and where you are today?
Yeah. I had a crazy journey, right? So for me, I started out in journalism, public relations in college. Lawyering was the furthest thing from from my mindset, right? I promoted clubs in Hollywood. Like I was on a whole different trajectory and path. And
promoted clubs in Hollywood?
Yeah. So I used to promote clubs in Hollywood when I was an undergrad. Don't ask me how old I was. I'm not going to get those promoters in trouble, but I was not of age. But I was in a car accident. I was getting ready to move to New York for an internship with one of the top 3 PR companies in the world. And I was very excited. And I got rear-ended by a drunk driver in the beginning of the summer, just a few weeks before I was going to move. And I ended up needing physical therapy and to find a different job. I couldn't move to New York. So I'm in Baltimore and I worked at a civil rights firm, Murphy, Falcon and Murphy, and they had a police brutality case. An individual who had been picked up for public intoxication, who while incarcerated was thrown against the wall by these police officers and became a quadriplegic. And I had the opportunity to work on his case and be a part of getting some recourse for him, though there will never be enough recourse, right, for someone who has lost all use of their limbs. But I got to be a part of that, and it really inspired me to be a voice for the voiceless, right, be a voice for my community. I had the skill set, I had the access, I had the ability, and I had the passion. And so I went back to college, right, for my senior year, and I started taking a bunch of law classes that I had never really thought of before. And I applied to law school, and I was like, I'm going to be a public defender. And that was my thought process. I was like, I'm going to go and I'm going to be a public defender. And so I, volunteered and worked for free and did all those things. And I got poached by the state's attorney's office of Baltimore City while I was in law school. And they said, we really want people who think like you, who don't take everything that's written down as fact and that are going to question the narrative, because state's attorneys are supposed to be, or district attorneys, depending on where someone lives, they're really supposed to be the gatekeepers of justice, right? And so I started working there. And while I was there, I graduated law school. I became an attorney in the state's attorney's office. And, Trayvon Martin happened, and Freddie Gray happened, and Michael Brown happened. And, all of these cases kept happening. And I couldn't stay on the sideline, right? It was polarizing. Freddie Gray was in Baltimore, by the way. So we had, we went under martial law, essentially, right? Because there was huge protests. And the state's attorney at the time elected to indict the 6 officers in that case. So the officers in Baltimore City just stopped coming to work. They stopped coming to the courts. They stopped showing up, et cetera. And I started protesting. I went to Ferguson. I protested in Shaw. We got maced. I went to New York and protested the Eric Garner decision. I ended up on the front page of the New York Times. It was like a whole lot of work. But in that time, I started working with volunteer groups that were trying to look at what was happening. So Campaign Zero being one of them. I told you it's a long story, right? How I got here is really, really long. But I started working with these different organizations and looking at the economic cost. Why do we keep generation after generation not making headway? Why is the racial wealth gap continuing to grow? I understood how the criminal justice system impacted that, but what about just wealth in general? Like, how is it that we are not keeping what we accumulate in one generation? Where is it going and why? And from that perspective, I started doing deep dives into the intergenerational wealth aspect. Why is the wealth that we accumulate, that we work and spend our entire lives for, not benefiting the next generation? Yeah. Some of it was financial literacy, but a bunch of it was related to estate planning. 70% of African Americans don't have any estate planning at all. And what the numbers showed is that only 14% of college-educated African Americans even got $10,000 to the next generation, which means 86% of college-educated African Americans were not passing $10,000 to the next generation. Yeah. We're passing negative wealth, but we're working ourselves to the bone to provide, and yet there's nothing left over. And why? And so much of that is related to proper and comprehensive estate planning, as well as the financial literacy elements. So that's sort of how I moved into this space, to say, this is my part of the fight, right? There are a lot of people working on the criminal justice avenues. There's a lot of people working on police reform, community reform. And I said, nobody's talking about this estate planning part, and we have to talk about it. Because right now we're on the precipice of one of the largest wealth transfers in the history of this country. The baby boomers hold the majority of the wealth, even whether it feels like it or not, they do. And we are slated to lose all of those gains. And based on where we are, we will never recover if we can't adequately protect what they've given us. So it does really feel like it's a state of emergency right now to get as many people in our community effectively covered. And that's kind of how I ended up here at this part of the fight.
That is amazing.
So I got a question. When it came down for you to really focus on the economic side, like when you found out new information, who did you run to first?
What do you mean?
As far as like your inner circle of people to explain to them, like, this is what's going on. Like, how did that happen? Did they tell you, like, Portia, that's just how it's going to be? Why you think you're going to change the world? Or they was like, you know what, we should do something about this? Were they supportive immediately? How does that, because that's usually the issue with our community, is that once we get presented new information, is either, it's receptive or it's not, immediately.
So I would say that I come from a family of very we can change the world kind of people, right? Okay. My family owns a newspaper. It is the oldest Black family-owned newspaper in the country. It's 131 years old, out of Baltimore, Maryland. It's called the Afro-American Newspaper. It was founded by my great-great-grandfather, who was born enslaved, right? And so when we think about, and he wrote about it, he wrote about why he started this paper and why it was so important to have someone who told our stories, who could synthesize information about legal changes, who could talk about our successes, because the only thing in mainstream news was our failures and our vilification. But how do we celebrate Black joy? And so when we think about that history, right, that still continues and persists today, I grew up in that environment. And so for me, when we started this, and I said a rising tide raises all boats, like, that is an ethos of our family, that when we know better, we do better. And when we know better, we have an obligation to share. And so what I recognize as a sixth generation person within that family is that I had access and information that not everybody in my community had, that I needed to share. Because it's not enough to be alone at the top, right? Like, you have to bring everybody else with you. Otherwise it's lonely, right? Yeah. So everybody should have an opportunity to learn. So when I said, hey, look at these stats, look at these numbers, it wasn't so much, I don't believe you or this or that. It was, oh, let's dive deeper. Let's dive deeper in that. Let's pull out some more information. Let's talk to people who have done it, because there are many people who have done estate planning that don't talk about it, right? Especially at the top. And they're just not going to say anything about it, right? It's a personal thing generally. So bringing that conversation to the mainstream, getting people to open up about their processes, challenging other estate planning attorneys who don't look like me, because there's less than 1% of estate planning attorneys that look like me, right? Challenging them and their narrative to say, you can't just balance sheet estate plan for Black people. They're not the same as your white clients. And you can't do these mediocre plans based on just the amount of money in their bank. You got to look at their goals. You got to look at their knowledge base. You've got to look at who their beneficiaries are. You cannot dismiss the fact that we had a whole war on drugs, which was essentially a war on Black and brown people in this country. So a lot of people have contacts with the incarceral system that may be on probation, that may own restitution issues. And if you've got one house that could be a beacon of wealth for a family, and one beneficiary has restitution issues, the state can take that house. So it's understanding these unique nuances that are particularly important for us, because there are ways you can still leave that house and give to that child without the state intervening. But people don't know that. So yeah, I think my family was like, let's go. So we've been doing lots of articles, and the conversation has definitely been building.
And I think that's definitely a great advantage to have, because, like, to piggyback off of what KB said is, when we decided we wanted to take the leap into becoming entrepreneurs, it wasn't something that everyone in the family was like, yeah, go for it. You could do it. It was more of like, wait, you want to work for yourself? You want to not have health insurance? You want to, so it was a lot of going against the grain. So I feel like having that support definitely, will improve anyone's confidence. So I think that's one great aspect. One thought or question that came to my mind, Portia, that I want you to, share your thoughts on is, when we were coming up with the topic or the name for this episode, we said how to obtain generational wealth with Portia Wood. But you were saying that's kind of like a touchy or a trendy word, but that shouldn't be the goal. You said the goal shouldn't be to obtain generational wealth. And could you explain why you said that?
Yeah, just in thinking about it, right? The term itself, generational wealth, is essentially wealth for a generation. What we are seeking to do is to create intergenerational wealth that transcends beyond generations, right? So not just my generation, but the generation that comes after, that 6 generations below me are continuing to benefit or enjoy the garden from the seeds that I've planted today. And I don't have to have a lot. And that's the piece that I think most people miss, is that I don't have to have a lot today for that to be true. I just need a comprehensive plan that's going to self-perpetuate, that's going to continue over and over again, for that to be true. And that's where we start to leverage things like life insurance. It's where you leverage things like multi-generational trusts. When you can put these pieces together, then you can constantly have new money every time somebody in your family passes away. And I know it's a little bit taboo in our in our community, but the reality is life insurance can be your best friend, right? There are, have you guys ever read the book, What Would the Rockefellers Do? Have you ever heard of it?
I didn't finish it.
Okay. So it is a big promotion for life insurance. It really is in the way that it's written. But there's so much value in there, because what they did was they combined a trust, really an ILIT, right, or an irrevocable life insurance trust, with life insurance. And they put provisions in that every new baby born in the family gets $1 million life insurance policy.
Whoa.
What does that mean? Right? Not a term life insurance policy, but a permanent life insurance policy that cash compounds and creates a tax-free wealth vehicle for that child. But the trust owns it. The trust is the beneficiary of it. And that child is just the insured. It's just their life. So we think about compounding interest, right? You start at 0 and you go to full life expectancy of 80, right? 78, 82, depending man or woman. That amount of cash compounding on $1 million life insurance policy is going to be worth multiples of millions, right? By the time they pass away. But what does it do? Well, one, when they buy it as a baby, it's super cheap, comparatively speaking, right? If that child wants to go to college, do they need to go and get a predatory loan from FAFSA? And yes, I call it a predatory loan because let's be really clear. Kids are stuck in this debt trap. It's $1 trillion in debt. It's insane. People can't move in this economy. But do I need to go to FAFSA and get a predatory student loan? Or can I go to my life insurance that has a cash value because it's been compounding for the last 20 or 25 years and pull it out tax-free?
Hey.
Right? And people always say to me, they go, Portia, that's ridiculous. Like, you can't do that. I did it. I literally did it. I got a life insurance policy when I was pregnant with my son. He's 6 now. Okay. Last year in November, we bought a building in Cleveland. I needed the money for the down payment for that building in Cleveland. I didn't want to sell any stocks. The market was down. So I went to the cash value inside of my life insurance policy, the cash that had accrued inside of my life insurance, and I took it out. I took it out at a 5% loan. Loans are tax-free, so there's no tax on this money that I've taken. It hit my bank account in 2 days. I closed on a property that now cash flows. I use the cash flow to pay back that loan so that the next time I want to go buy a property, I can use the cash value inside of my life insurance policy again, tax-free, and I can continue to rinse and repeat. Now, that's what I have on mine. My son has a life insurance policy. His is cash compounding. When he gets to a certain age, he can start to do the same thing. And these are strategies that exist during this generation, right? But when I pass away, my life insurance will also play to my trust. And that life insurance will then sit there, right? Because of the way I've structured my trust, the principal of that life insurance can't be spent. It needs to be invested. If I get let's say it's $2 million. Let's say I get 5%. I just created $100,000 in interest income annually for life to help subsidize and support my child. And if I say, hey, when he has children, that $100,000 in interest income, a portion of it needs to be used to buy life insurance on his kids. And when my son passes away,
we got to break that down. That's so much gems. So many. Oh my gosh. All right, KB, I feel like you had something to say. I'll let you go first and then I'll ask my question because she's given us so much game.
So my thing is for the people who hear life insurance, the first thing they think of is that how do you help them get educated on that it's not another bill? Because that's what they most think of. Like, they think of premium, like, yo, that's another bill. I barely have money now. And I know when it comes down, like, sure, it depends on what you can afford, but you could start with little as, $20, a couple dollars a month. And I know over time, it can add up a compound interest, but most people, that's the first thing they think, like, I'm barely struggling now. How can I sign up for life insurance and that's another bill that I have to pay for. If I don't pay for it, then it's going to lapse.
Yeah. So there's several different things to that, right? One is people tend to have more money than they think they do.
Right.
And that is where budgeting comes in, right? Making sure that every dollar is assigned a job. Too many times we spend indiscriminately. And I will be the first person to tell you that I have absolutely done that. And I am not always successful at sticking to my budget, right? And I have to reel myself back in. So it is not a foolproof thing, right? We are human, we are fallible. But the reality is that when we have a budget that assigns every dollar that comes in a job, the first assignment needs to be paying ourselves first. That cell phone bill, that cable bill, the TV, like whatever it is, those are secondary. You got to pay yourself first. And so when we look at life insurance and we look at other things, what happens if you don't come home? Like first and foremost, right? Before we even talk about the economic benefits, Kim, you don't come home tomorrow. How does your family continue to thrive the way they do now? Can they?
No.
Have you saved enough for your income to be replaced for life? Or will they have to look at another place to live? Might they have to look at changing their jobs? Like what happens to your family? So first and foremost, it's not a bill, right? Like your family depends on it. And the reality is that when we look at appropriate amounts of life insurance, we should be looking at what do we bring to our household annually and multiply it by 20. If you've got minor kids, you should be multiplying that by 20. Because how do I make sure that I can get my kids from infancy to adulthood if I'm not here? So when people say it's a bill or, I don't want people to get rich after I die. I mean, there are certain realities of life. Everybody is going to die at some point, and what value we bring to our family economically can be replaced.
Wait, I've never heard people say that. There's a narrative where people say, I don't want people to get rich after I die.
Oh, yeah, 100%. I don't want to be worth more dead than alive.
Oh, snap.
People get worried that they're going to get, bopped over the head or, left in a corner somewhere or someone's going to pull the plug, right? It's the same thing people said about organ donation. Oh, I don't want to be an organ donor because they're going to kill me. They're not going to try and save me.
Oh,
right.
God.
We've heard all of these narratives before, but the reality is if we don't get life insurance and we don't protect our own, who's going to protect us?
Nobody.
I mean, nobody. Who's coming? Nobody's coming. The only people that can take care of our families and ourselves is us. And so if we are unwilling to say we're going to make that a priority, right? And we look at it as an obligation versus a necessity, that's where we have to have a mindset shift. So when I talk about it as twofold. I talk about it as a necessity, and I talk about it as an economic vehicle. For people who are older like us, right? If we still have our parents and grandparents that are alive, I talk to families and I say, hey, pool together, pool your resources and get insurance on grandma. Why not? It's probably too expensive for her to do it herself. She's likely on a fixed income. It's not something that she's going to do, but it's an investment for you. It seems morbid, right? People say that to me. They're like, it seems morbid. The reality is she's going to pass. She's going to need care. People are going to have to take off work to come and care for her or pay a caregiver or other things. And there is an economic cost to letting our family members transition with dignity. And the economic cost is borne by us, right? The next generation that comes down. So how do we hedge against that? We can pool our resources and get insurance so that when they do finally transition, there is a set of economics that comes back to us tax-free, by the way, for us to then either replenish our stores or be able to go and buy a house or do other things. Too often, we're doing fish fries, right? Or GoFundMes. I mean,
It's true.
It's true. We're asking the community to help us lay our family members to rest with dignity.
So question. So you said, well, there's two things that came to my mind. So one was what you were talking about with the Rockefeller, the book, right?
Yeah.
You said that book that you recommend us to read, it was the Rockefeller leaving life insurance policies for every generation.
It's called What Would the Rockefellers Do? And essentially what they did was they created a trust. And they created an irrevocable trust. They funded it with life insurance. And they put provisions that every new baby born the trust would purchase life insurance on them.
For how many? How many?
Everyone.
What?
Everyone.
Infinite.
So every new baby born. So you think about the immediate generation, right? The kids, they have their policies. Then the grandkids have their policies, but it's owned by the same trust. So when the kids die off, right? The value of that life insurance policy goes back into the trust. So let's say the value of that life insurance policy is now $8 million, but the trust only paid $40,000 for the coverage, right? That $8 million goes into the trust. Well, now you can buy, $140,000 $1 million life insurance policies on babies for $40,000 or whatever those numbers run out to be, and still have cash left over. So they keep refilling the coffers. You don't need your business to succeed because your money makes money, right? KB, you talked about, businesses and wealth. It's typically gone by the third generation. It's true. Look at the Vanderbilts. The Vanderbilt family amassed the largest fortune the world had ever seen, right? The U.S. had ever seen, the largest fortune that the U.S. had ever seen, ever, even in today's dollars, right? The Vanderbilt family. Shipping magnates, right? They just had a Vanderbilt die, essentially, quote unquote, per se, in poverty. Mm-hmm. You have Anderson Cooper who talks about he's from the Vanderbilt family, and he's like, there's no money. Like, there's none. There's no money. It's been blown. Lack of estate planning, lack of financial literacy, keeping up with the Joneses, all of these things. The big estates that they used to own, they don't own anymore.
Wow.
They didn't have the structure. So it's not about how much wealth you make, right? That's the piece that people miss. It's not about how much you make. It's how much you keep. And how much you keep is based on the plan. If it's based on your business maintaining forever, no business maintains forever.
That's a fact.
Eventually, something's going to put Amazon out of business. Right? Eventually, like Netflix came and put Blockbuster out of business. It's just going to happen because technology keeps changing. The reality is that once you've amassed a system or created a system, your money creates money. And that's where we have the conversation of the family wealth, right? We come in and we talk at the family dinner and we say, hey, look, each of you could put in $40 or $45 a month and get coverage on grandma.
Oh, that was going to be my second follow-up, is the strategy of what you would recommend, because the big issue is a lot of people in our community, you're right, when someone passes away, it's a GoFundMe, it's the fish fry, it's you're trying to raise money in like embarrassing ways, like I don't know how else to say it, but that's a problem. So you would recommend, or what you're saying, and for the listeners listening, kind of pay attention to this, but you're saying it would make more sense for like a family to come together, everyone put a set amount policy on someone, an older person in the family, to secure, when they pass away, that they won't be scrambling to pay for a funeral for that person.
I mean, yeah, if only funeral coverage was the thing, right? I reached out to my siblings and I said, hey, our aunt, she doesn't have any kids. She's going to need care, right? She's going to need care. She's been an entrepreneur all her life. So it's probably going to be us. They care for her. We should get a policy together. And so we did. And it was not just thinking about her burial, but also what is the economic cost that we will have to bear to care for her, whether that be in-home care or nursing home care or whatever that is, because 63% of people over the age of 65 need some form of long-term care before they pass away. So how do we pay for that? And if we don't pay someone, we are taking time away from our own jobs to then care for her, which still has an economic cost, because nobody's just going to leave her in the streets, right? So it's not just how do we get coverage, it's how do we think about the economic future? And really, it's not even just let's get it on the oldest person, right? Because like him, you need insurance. Yeah. The amount of insurance you need is different, because it's how do I protect my family and my babies and make sure that my future is secure, right? There's also the other side of how do I not drain all my savings to care for my mom or my dad? Yeah. Because it's twofold. So there's different needs, and those are different plans, and everybody's situation is unique, right? So there's no way to say one thing is this is the golden rule and this is how you do it. It's how do we look at your unique family structure, your family situation, and say, what can we do to make sure that you're secure?
Don't you think that would be like, KB, and this is my last one, then I'll let you go, KB, but I'm thinking in my head as you're speaking, I see a lot of benefit to that aspect. But then I also feel like there's a lot of, pushback that people could do, because it's like we're kind of plotting for, when my grandma dies, if we all just go in on it, it kind of can have a negative connotation to it. So how do you combat that for when people are looking at it from that aspect? Is like, oh, that's you wrong for doing that, instead of this.
Are you wrong for that?
Yeah.
You know anybody who lives forever? Okay. So the reality is that nobody has the fountain of youth, right? Like nobody. And, it is not taboo to plan. But for some reason, we've been taught these generational traumas around money and around wealth to keep it silent. And not for some reason. Let me take that back. It's not for some reason. We were specifically trained this way by our society. Because there were times, right, where we in community built wealth and had generational plans. I mean, and the actual government stole it violently, right? I think about Central Park in New York, the thriving Seneca Village that was there, and the use of eminent domain as a legal weapon to take wealth from Black people violently, essentially overnight, erasing their existence, right? And turning it into a public park to say, oh, look at how the beautiful green space. Or Lake Lanier, where they literally drowned an entire Black community. And now you see these white people going in, diving in Lake Lanier and pillaging our jewelry and wealth that was left under the lake because they drowned us, right? Or the firebombing of Tulsa, Oklahoma. And the list goes on and on and on, right? There are true traumas and horrors that are in our past that has been passed down generationally, right? Those grandparents and great-grandparents who experienced that taught their kids to be quiet, right? Don't be too flashy. Don't let people know what you have. Don't trust the banks, right? Talk about the Freedmen's Bank. They came and pushed all the debts and lost all these former enslaved people's money after that was supposed to be the pathway into society, right? Don't trust the banks. Where did that come from? Mattress money.
Yeah.
Right? There's so many instances that are directly correlated to actions of the government here and the communities here in the United States that have impacted the way Black people think about wealth. And it comes from trauma. It doesn't come from a place of knowledge and saying, oh, this is the best way to make our money grow. It comes from trauma. We've been traumatized into being quiet. And what we're realizing is that this generation, our generation, with the internet, the access to sort of world economy, the access to world knowledge, right, and history in a way that has never been available before, we are the change makers. That's why people keep talking about breaking these generational curses. It's because we actually have the tools and ability to do it. And we can do it in a way that is our own personal autonomy that protects us, right? Even with bank failures, even with these other things, there are mechanisms for us to create our own economies, particularly in the digital space. Podcasts, sharing information, all of these things have an actual economic value that other people can't tap into. We have ownership now in a way that we didn't have before. And the digital economy can't be drowned as easily as the towns, right? As the physical communities. And so when we think about that conversation, we have to start with the history. We got to understand why people's mindset is where it is and bring them along all the way through the journey to say, okay, here's how we can start to leverage this into the other things. Now, I'm going to say something really controversial. You're welcome. We should have life insurance on every Black baby in our community because the life insurance lobby is second only to the NRA. And if we want police to stop killing our children, they should have life insurance because the life insurance lobby will lobby for gun reform because they will not want to have to pay out all of these policies.
That's
the reality is we're not going to win that argument on a moral argument. You can see what's going on in Gaza to say that we're not going to win that argument on a moral argument. We have to win it on an economic one. And the only way to force economics is if we have life insurance on all of our children so that when they do slaughter us because they're not stopping, there is an economic cost that triggers the life insurance companies to lobby for reform because they're the ones that have the money to do it.
That's
so
powerful.
There's multiple avenues for life insurance.
So for the listeners, people that's really in tune with the episode, they might be inspired. What is you suggest the first step is to do? Like after hearing this episode, what do you think this should be the action steps?
Get educated. We have free resource libraries, both on woodlegalgroup.com as well as blacktrustfundkids.com. Join our community. You can join it for free. We've got discussions. We bring in professionals to come and talk about these different things, Black professionals, Black and brown professionals from all around the country to come and talk about these issues. Just get educated. We've got courses up the wazoo, right? We've got so many different courses. Take the time to start to learn and then bring other people along, right? Talk to your family, sit down, have that conversation, begin that journey, right? Of truly understanding where they've been. Many people, have never sat down and asked their parents how they learned about money.
That's,
you know what I mean?
Like one thing that you just said that really just spoke to me is that for me, even myself, I'm 30 years old and I still feel uncomfortable sitting down with my mom and my dad and just asking them some of those uncomfortable questions of one, just our family history, right? And then like you always say, the conversation of money has never been something, because you don't want to talk about something that you don't have, So I feel like that's the issue in the Black community. That's why we don't talk about it, because we grow up not having it. So why talk about something you don't have? It's like it just doesn't make sense. So I think that is a very, very important part for everyone watching, is being able to sit down, myself included, and just have the conversation. I have a big desire of wanting to learn more of my family history. And I feel like it starts with just having that conversation.
Yeah. So you still feel uncomfortable now?
Yeah, I still do. I still do feel uncomfortable. I'm not gonna lie, because it's, no matter how old you are, I feel like it's always that, the superiority of like, that's my mom. That's my dad. So I feel like it's even till this day, I still feel slightly uncomfortable with it. But I'm feeling more confident in initiating that conversation. And one of my goals is to, just kind of get my mom and my dad in the same room, and they're divorced. So that's going to be a battle in itself, but trying to get both of them in the same room. Yeah. So maybe I could start on Zoom. That could be the first initiative. But like, I just want to sit down and just kind of have that, because I have so many questions, but I'm just like, you don't know where to start.
Yeah. So you can always, like I said, you can always do a strategy session with us, right? To get them in the room. So then it's not you. It takes the pressure off of it. It just starts the conversation. It also brings people to a baseline knowledge, right? When people understand the process, then you can start to talk about possibility. What we found is that most people don't understand the process. Like, what are the steps? What actually happens if you get sick or if you pass away, right? People have these ideas that they're very jarbled because they're based on what they've seen, but they don't know why that's happened. And so getting people to a baseline knowledge helps to then create a situation where you can talk about these things, because they're like, I know I don't want that. So now we need to talk about what is. Because there is a default, and the default is what nobody wants, right? But the reason they don't talk about it is because they don't know that that's the default, right? Yeah. So like, they don't know that's where they already are. They think, or they assume that something's going to go a particular way because they want it to in their head, but it's not actually what happens. And so understanding what the default is really important, so that then we can come to what we actually want. The other thing I'll say is that we hear this a lot. Our generation saying, I don't know how to broach this conversation with the older generation. I don't know how to start the conversation without seeming like I'm prying or doing any of these other things. So we actually came up with a card game, and we created a card game that we are launching this holiday season. It's actually coming out right before Thanksgiving. And it is a card game about all of these things. So it's, what is your legacy? Like, really understanding the people that are in our family. Who are you? Right? Who are you as a person? Why did you choose the job that you did? Why? What was your favorite memory as a child? What would you want your legacy to be? How would you want to be remembered by great-great-grandchildren?
What's the name of that card game?
So our Black Generational Wealth card game, it's coming out in November. So it will be available for pre-sale actually in 2 weeks.
I'm definitely getting that. You definitely got a customer in me, because that could be what you just said, an initiation of starting that conversation. Mm-hmm. If you could do it in a more less tense way, I think that could trigger some of those conversations. So I'm locked in with that.
Oh, I love that. Yeah, I find that multi-generational conversations, right? And it's never too early to bring the kids along. Right. My son is 6. I love to have him in these conversations with my parents because I need him to understand that this is a normal part of life. Right. It wasn't necessarily as normal for us. We do family meetings, and we have always done family meetings as kids. But it wasn't as consistent as I do them now with my son. And so trying to create a sense of normalcy around having these conversations, because it's up to us to change that trajectory, right? We got to get through that uncomfortableness with ourselves, and then teach the kids not to ever have that anxiety, so that they can carry it forward.
How often do you do those meetings with your son?
Weekly. So we sit down and we look at his stocks. He's got a custodial account. I don't do birthday gifts. I don't do Christmas presents. not really. But what I asked people, at least for the first few years of his life, was please don't get him any stuff. Like, he's got plenty of stuff. I get him plenty of stuff around all year long, right? Whatever he needs, please just donate to his custodial account. So for the first couple of years of his life, people would donate instead of bringing gifts. One, it kept clutter down in my house, which I appreciate. Two, the $20 you might have spent on a toy goes so much further in his investment account, compounding over time, than that toy that probably got broken or thrown out or donated 6 months later, right? That just doesn't have any more value. So he ended up getting several thousands of dollars by the time he was 2, and he's 6 now, and he's got almost $45,000 in his account. And this is just by being intentional about how it goes. So Christmas, birthdays, all the stuff. If he got cash in a card, I'd say, hey, what do you want to do with it? Do you want to buy a toy? Or you want to put it in your account? And he'd put half in the account and half of it, he'd go buy a toy or something for himself. So like constantly keeping this idea of like, pay yourself first, donation, right? Anytime he brings new toys in, we got to grab some toys and take them to somebody else less fortunate. We can't, we've got to keep all of that moving, because we're not going to have more than what we need. And we're going to prioritize you sort of focusing on setting yourself up. So we look at his stocks. Does that mean he understands it? No. Right? Let's be clear. No. But he understands charts. He looks at the graphs, gains and losses. He's looking across. We're talking about what do you want to invest in? Most of the time it's like Marvel, which is technically Disney. So it's like we look at these things, right? And it just creates the language. There's no language barrier. And I think, like Kim, you said it earlier, KB, maybe it was you, where you talked about the language stops people.
Yeah.
But if we make the language just as normal as ABC, right, then the kids never have those barriers.
You know what's crazy? So like all of the game and the gems that you've been given, I've never heard KB this quiet, like ever. So the fact that like he's quiet and he's listening, everyone watching this, that's how you know he's like really into this. Like I lie to you not, Portia. KB normally is really like very talkative, but he's just really
learning.
Yeah, he's learning a lot. And I appreciate that, so I feel like just the gems that you've been bringing to the community has been not, and that's why I wanted you to come to the community, because the way you speak now is how you spoke to me in Puerto Rico. And I was like, we have to have more people to hear the gems. So as we kind of transition, KB, I don't know if you want to maybe ask, Portia one final question, and then maybe tell us like your overall takeaway. I'll share that as well. And then we'll have Portia, transition into her final thoughts and anything that she would want to share with the community.
Yeah, she actually answered my last question about, how, her son, receives the information. But that's a great example, because we know certain things culturally that's taught to us, but not all of those things can be beneficial to us. That's just the way it is. So if we make economic education, that's just the way it is kind of concept, then, our children this will be the standard for them. So, yeah, she definitely answered my question. I'm just admired by the structure that you have, because the structure and still giving your son an actual choice as well, in the matter of if you want to do this, you want to do that. And
yeah,
if we were raised the right way, you'll learn to make better decision making. And I think that's been a hard time as an adult for a lot of people, is to make a decision. So if you are raised at a young age, 4 or 5, to make decisions, by the time you get, 25, 30, it's like, no, this is what I want, because I know what's going to happen after that. So I admire that. And I wanted to learn that before I have kids. So that's why I don't have anything yet. But if I do, I want to have, a similar setup, a similar structure, because we digest so much. I have a niece, she's 2. She knows, what is it? Lululemon or I forgot the cartoon, but so much of it where she's locked in, which is fine. But it's like, at the same time, where is she locked in with valuable information? Where she's locked in with things that can actually really benefit her, not just entertain her. And I think that is something that's missing in our community, because we just want the kids to be, shut up. We just don't want them crying. So let's just give them something so they could be glued. And, that pacifies the situation. But that's a temporary answer to, a permanent problem that we've been having in the community. So I just want to say I admire that. And I hope that our listeners not only listening, but also take another look and actually take notes and, reach out. Is the most one of the hardest things in our community is to reach out for help or reach out for guidance, because it's a sense of informability that you need to have. So I'm the type of person, I'm always going to remain a student, and, I'm interested in learning more about your program, what you offer, and, having that conversation. I always talk about change the conversation at, Thanksgiving this year, change the conversation at Christmas, really, pull somebody to the side and ask them like, yo, what's your plan? What are you trying to do? What are you working on? And that's what's needed, instead of just talking about the old times when we didn't have much. Or,
The struggle.
Yeah, you talk about the struggle, you talk about the game, you talk about, Kim Kardashian or, what's going on in pop culture. Let's talk about something that's actually going to benefit us, and we can have a plan going forward for family.
Yeah, I love that. Just to add a little bit to that, right? There are a couple of families that I've worked with that do family reunions, right? We created this family reunion concept. But the family reunions, what they do is they actually have an investment club inside of their family reunion. Wow. So they had everybody pool their resources. They put a certain amount of money away a month. Everybody contributes, and they buy properties. They invest in stocks. They've bought cryptocurrency. But not everybody participates, but everybody gets the option. And then they do these financial literacy programs for the family. So they've brought me in to come in to speak. They've brought in other wealth managers, people to speak about credit, people to help people who perhaps in the family have bad credit or need assistance. There was one woman who had gotten a divorce. She was living with another one of the family members. And then the following year, her credit score was up, 150 points. She had just bought her first house. She had gone through the NACA program. And all of that was those family assistance, right? The reality is it only takes one person with a plan. One person to step up and be the leader with the plan that can guide and shepherd people forward. And with enough humility to say, I don't know everything, right? Like my ego is out of the way. I don't know everything, but I know that there are people who do. So let's convene with those people so that we can all move forward. Anybody can do that. Any of your listeners can also do that, right? They're not unique and special in the sense that there's some mythical creature, right? They're not unicorns in the community. They just took the initiative first. You can follow that example and do it within your own family. Everybody can't come along, right? Everybody's not going to make it, but there are enough people that will. And it's a lot easier to come up with $1,000 amongst 10 people for a down payment than it is to come up with $10,000 by yourself. And we go way further faster when we do it together.
Yeah. And I think that, there's so many things that our community needs to hear. So my final, takeaway from everything that Portia said was just the way that you raise your son. I feel like giving him the option and the ability to make decisions. What I realize is with my older sister, I have 3 nephews, and I realized one of the biggest mistakes my sister did, and sorry, sis, if you listen to this or watch this, but it's not giving my nephews, your sons, the ability to make decisions at a young age. So they become very dependent, and they don't know, they can't think on their own. And that's a big thing that I realized that, my parents allowed me to do. I feel like that's what KB parents allowed him to do, is like make your own decisions. But then when you have the guidance of, kind of you're making your own decisions, but you're being guided in the right direction, it changes the trajectory of your life. And the concept of getting insurance policies for your kids at a young age, KB and I, we don't have any kids. Hold on. KB doesn't have any kids. I don't have any kids. And one of the biggest things is being able to have the right mindset when I raise my family and when KB raised his family. That's going to change the way that we look at that. So my biggest thing is I appreciate the insight of you sharing how you currently structure and how you raise your son, because a lot of people, as they raise kids, they don't have the knowledge that they need to have their kids make the right decision. And I just also like the thing about the gift too, of instead of having people buy them gifts, just donate to, their investments. That will go way longer than a toy that they'll break in a month.
100%. 100%. 100%. And it keeps your house decluttered, by the way. So in case you parenting hack, and some people will buy gifts, right? Like when he has friends come over, I let his friends buy him gifts, right? But when I talk to our family, don't buy him anything. He's put it in his investment account, and people do, right? And they contribute, and that holiday funds, he gets to watch that grow.
Yeah.
So every time we sit down and we look at it, he gets to watch that grow over time. And that's a powerful thing.
So Portia, I guess our final question for you is, what's one thing you want to leave the listeners with? And then, how could they reach out to you if they're interested in, having a consultation with you or just learning more about your services?
Yeah. I would say just get started, right? Just keep taking the next right step. We're never going to know it all at once. So it's just keep learning, keep striving, keep seeking the information, because it is out there. Getting in touch with me is fairly easy, right? blacktrustfundkids.com is where we have a lot of our educational content. We also have all of our classes. We have our resource library. So that kind of stuff where you can just tap into today. And for any of our courses or, the books or anything like that, if you use the code HOOD, they get 15% off for part of this, for a listener of this podcast. So that's a great way to get started and gathering more information.
Amazing. So you guys, heard it here first. Again, if you saw some value in this episode, do us a favor, leave us a 5-star review. That's how KB, myself, and even Portia now being on the episode, get a chance to get the word out about the podcast to everyone else. Give us a 5-star review. Tell someone about this episode. And we appreciate you guys. KB, any last thoughts?
Nah, let's get to it and get this well for the fam.
Entrepreneurhood.
Anyone can start, but only champions finish. Now that you've completed this episode, you're ready to continue your journey by connecting directly with our hosts of Entrepreneurhood. Follow us on Instagram at The Entrepreneurhood to stay updated with the community. For each episode, the first set of listeners to tag us on Instagram and leave a 5-star review will be entered into a drawing to get a free one-on-one coaching session on the topic of entrepreneurship with our hosts. Remember, there is no shame in struggling, because we fail, we grow, and we win. Right here on Entrepreneurhood.